Hello, and welcome to the EDCI Nightly News. I'm your host, Clara Benjamin.
And I'm your co-host, Aduga Iwala. Today, we are here to discuss the ongoing influx of illegal immigrants into the United States. Many U.S. citizens are extremely concerned about how this new crop of people will affect the current economy. But before we tackle that, let's look at what the cause of this issue is, with specific focus on the country of El Salvador.
Coffee. This was the main export in the country, which is what led to the wage gap between the rich and the poor. This led to an insurrection by the poor in 1932, led by Agustin Marti, and the army responded by killing almost 30,000 people. In 1980, President Carter provided $50 million to the El Salvadorian government with $5 million for the military. This type of aid continued during the Civil War with the Reagan administration.
The first influx of people into the U.S. came during the Civil War. The war was between the right-wing National Consolation Party, or PCN, and the leftist anti-government guerrilla units held by...
Now, we are going to hear from Austin, who is going to tell us about the current living conditions in El Salvador.
Clara, talking about the effects of the war and the current conditions. After 1980, there was a lot of poverty in the country. The greatest source of income was set by Salvadorians outside of the country. In 1998, Hurricane Mitch devastated the country, and in 2001, earthquakes also devastated the country, and people fled to the U.S. Now, it is the most smallest and densely populated country in Central America, and it has an extremely high murder rate, and is considered one of the most violent countries in the world because there's lots of rape, murder, and gang activity. Now, the roads are underdeveloped, and it is a safety hazard for drivers, and vehicles are also not maintained well. There is a lot of protest against the government, and there's no privacy law enforcement. Now, the medical care is very limited in the country as well. And now back to you, Clara.
Thank you, Austin. Based on this information, I hope that everyone will begin to get an idea of why people from this region in Central America make their way to the U.S.
And now we are going to hear from James, who has some information about the risks migrants face when making this journey.
Thanks, Adugo. It's raining pretty heavily out here, so I hope you guys can still hear me. It may be difficult to believe, but children will travel over 2,000 miles from El Salvador to reach the southernmost tip of Texas. The primary methods of making this journey are travel with the smuggler or ride top freight trains, but either way, the journey is treacherous. If a family can afford it, a child can be sent with the smuggler, called a coyote. Children may have to stay in small, crowded, dirty houses with large groups of other kids in very unhealthy environments. And migrants are also the targets of criminals and gang violence. Gangs often control the routes, and migrants are often robbed of what little money they have left and left beaten. This is fueled by the fact that some train conductors demand bribes in order to get on the train before it starts moving. Bandits expect the migrants to be carrying these bribes, making the migrants more prone to being robbed. Children can also be kidnapped and held for ransom. The National Human Rights Commission reported that more than 11,000 abductions of migrants occurred between April and September 2010. In Enrique's journey by Sonia Nazario, Enrique was kidnapped and robbed by corrupt police officers, being locked up in the back of their truck and released for 100 pesos. The prevalence of sexual violence is also a serious threat that plagues the journey up north. Migrants are aggressively pursued by border control agents. Once they leave the trains, they're often sent back home. It can take multiple attempts to make it back to the United States. But today, we Justin Elman on the set to shed some light on the current immigration policies in the U.S. toward Central Americans. Justin, it's all you.
Yeah, James, raining pretty hard out here. Gotta make sure we can hear us. So immigrants coming from Central America do not have a law in their favor once they come to the United States. Despite the massive number of deportations under the Obama administration, steps are being taken to address the growing number of undocumented immigrants living in the United States. In 2014, the Department of State and the U.S. Agency for International Development provided El Salvador with $21.6 million to aid their domestic development. While this sounds like a lot of money, we have to remember that the U.S. caused much of the domestic problems in El Salvador in the first place. The United States formed the Partnership for Growth with El Salvador to help the country overcome its domestic economic struggles. In 2013, foreign-born populations from El Salvador ranked as the sixth largest group of all foreign groups born in the United States at 1,252,067. The Department of Homeland Security estimates that 55% of the Salvadoran population in the United States is living here legally. This information is from the Embassy of the United States in El Salvador. However, a large number of Central Americans who would otherwise be deported have been allowed to stay in the United States because of something called the Temporary Protected Status, or TPS. TPS was created in 1990 to help foreigners trying to seek protection from civil conflicts or natural disasters in their own country. The people who are supposed to benefit from TPS were not supposed to be seeking permanent residence. The key is temporary. While TPS has been largely criticized, it has benefited 204,000 Salvadoran people living in the United States. This is from the Federation for American Immigrants. So the punishments for those who are not luckily under TPS are harsh. As Sonia Nazario discusses in her book Enrique's Journey, she discusses the legal actions that can be taken against Enrique for being undocumented. And I quote, "He could sit in a Texas jail for months before the United States processed the paperwork to deport him, most likely the juvenile prison in Liberty, Texas, 46 miles northeast of Houston, where many minors who are captured in Texas trying to enter the United States alone and illegally are sent away for deportation. This is not a sustainable solution. I think we can all agree we need long-term reform." That's it for policy. Back to you.
The DREAM Act is the Development, Relief, and Education for Alien Minors. It is a bill that was introduced in the U.S. government as a way for immigrants to achieve citizenship. Now, there are two different types of citizenship: conditional citizenship and permanent citizenship. Now, each has their own different requirements in the U.S. Unfortunately, the federal DREAM Act has never passed in the U.S. government, but each state has their own DREAM Act requirements. In the state of Maryland, it does not address citizenship for undocumented immigrants, but it does provide assistance in higher educational funding for undocumented students. Now, these requirements are students attend a Maryland high school for at least 3 years, and proof of payment through the parents of taxes. On June 15, 2012, President Obama introduced a new policy called the Deferred Action for Childhood Arrivals. Now, this allows immigrants before their 16th birthday and before June 2007 to receive a 2-year work permit to be exempted from deportation. Now, this does not lead to any citizenship.
Based on what we have heard today, I hope that everyone now understands what immigrants face when making their way to the U.S. I'm Clara Benjamin.
And I'm Adugo Iwala.
And this has been the EDCI Nightly News.